Welcome to Prime Stream from the Independent Intelligence Alliance, where we break down the critical issues shaping our world.
So it all started with this number, $119 per barrel. In just 6 short days, the price of oil pretty much doubled. And look, this wasn't just another price hike. No, this was a seismic energy shock, one that threatened to shatter the stability of an already pretty fragile global economy.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did an escalating conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran manage to bring the whole world to the brink? Well, in this explainer, we're going to trace that devastating ripple effect, all the way from a single maritime choke point right to your local economy. You know, for most of last year, it really felt like the global economy was heading for what they call a soft landing. But this conflict, it just shattered that illusion. It was a brutal reminder of just how interconnected and, honestly, how incredibly vulnerable our global systems really are.
Okay, so what was the actual geographical trigger for all this chaos? It all comes down to one tiny strip of water, one of the most strategic and, most vulnerable places on the entire planet.
Meet the Strait of Hormuz. The best way to think about this thing is as the global economy's jugular vein. It's the artery that a massive chunk of the world's energy flows through every single day.
And get this, at its narrowest point, it's just 21 miles wide. That tiny gap you see on a map is exactly what makes it so incredibly vulnerable to disruption. A really small space with absolutely enormous consequences.
And if you want to put its importance into perspective, look at this. 1/5, a full 20% of the entire world's daily supply of oil and natural gas has to pass through this single point. So you can imagine, when it gets clogged, the entire system starts backing up, like immediately.
And that is exactly what happened. Now, there's no formal, military blockade, but what you have is this toxic mix of military threats on one side and maritime insurance companies pulling out on the other. The result? It's become a total no-go zone. Traffic has just ground to a halt. That jugular vein we were talking about, it is clamped completely shut.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This crisis is so much more complicated than just a simple supply shortage. There are actually two counterintuitive problems making everything way worse, and it all starts with the type of oil we just lost.
First up, it's a quality problem. See, the world didn't just lose any old oil. We lost Iranian light crude. This stuff is the sweetheart of global refineries because it's way easier and cheaper to process into the fuels we actually use, like gasoline and diesel. Switching to heavier, dirtier alternatives, it's like asking a 5-star kitchen to suddenly start cooking with mud. It just gums up the works, slows everything down, and creates a massive bottleneck, both technically and financially.
And second, we've got this wild logistical paradox. Big producers like Saudi Arabia, they're actually cutting production. Not to drive up prices, but because they physically have nowhere left to store the oil. With the main exit door slammed shut, the entire regional system is just strangling itself.
And this is the point where the chaos really spills beyond the gas pump. What started as an oil shock is now rapidly, metastasizing into a crisis for the food we eat and the technology we all depend on. Turns out, the very same region that's locked in this conflict is a fertilizer powerhouse. It supplies a third of the world's urea. That's a key nitrogen component that is absolutely critical for, growing the world's food. So, with all those shipments halted, fertilizer prices have just skyrocketed. That 35% spike, it's not some abstract number. It means it now costs more to grow every single bushel of wheat, every ear of corn, which directly threatens crop yields and food security for billions of people.
And it's hitting our tech too. Qatar, a key gas producer right in the middle of all this, also happens to supply the world with critical stuff like helium and sulfur. And these aren't just elements on a periodic table. They are essential for making the microchips in our phones, our cars, our computers. When the gas stops flowing, the smart economy starts to break down.
And meanwhile, the airline industry is getting hit with a catastrophic double whammy. First, jet fuel costs have nearly doubled. But on top of that, with the airspace over the conflict zone closed, airlines are forced to fly longer, more expensive routes, burning even more of that ridiculously precious fuel.
So the international response, releasing strategic oil reserves and all that, it's really just a 20-day Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It buys a little bit of time, sure, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem. So analysts are now looking at 3 pretty grim possibilities for what comes next.
Okay, in a best-case containment scenario, diplomacy works, shipping lanes reopen, prices might settle back around $100. But if we enter a period of prolonged tension, So no full-scale war, but all this friction just continues, we could be stuck with $150 oil for a long, long time. And then there's the worst case. A full regional conflict could send oil screaming past $200, which would trigger the largest energy shock in modern history.
And listen, this isn't some theoretical exercise. The human cost is already here. It's happening right now. Nations across the globe are being forced to take drastic measures. The Philippines shifted to a 4-day work week just to cut down on commuting fuel. Bangladesh shut down its universities, which are huge power drains. These are not small tweaks. These are painful, society-altering decisions.
And all of this leaves us with a really haunting question. And it's not just about this crisis, but about the very foundation of our modern world. Our entire global economy, it's built on this hyper-efficient, just-in-time delivery model. But is that model even compatible with the brutal new reality of geopolitics? So if this breakdown was valuable for helping you understand the massive forces shaping our world, please do us a favor and share it. And make sure you follow PrimeStream to stay informed. Thanks for watching.